Hello for our last talk of track 2 for PloneConf 2022, Juggling the development of packaging-rich Python project with mxdev by Jens Klein.
Hello, hello. Much better. Today I present mxdev. We have in Plone a bunch of packages, right? And our release manager always provides us with a constraints file for the Python. There's another release manager here in the room. Hey, we're both here. Great. And they both provide us with a constraints file that contains all, whatever. How many packages are in there? 400 or more? Not sure. 300 to 400, something like that. Packages with versions in there. And yeah. And now I want to use pip to install my Plone site and need a new version of the REST API. I think I need to make this bigger. What is this here? Oh, no. Something working. Is that? Oh, can you read it? What's it? No, that's okay. That's the wrong terminal. Here we go. So the problem now is I want to override something. So I create constraints, override file to use, and oh, that's too much here. And I take here a bit older Plone versions to be beta 2 for demo, and want to use a new REST API. Looks good, right? I have this constraints file and put it in there. So, and now I say pip install -c my constraints Plone. Okay, we have a problem. I can't overwrite it because my constraints file I reference to, I have already a version, and now I try to overwrite it, and pip doesn't allow me to overwrite this. So, problem, right? Another use case. I want to use my mxdev on a branch version, and with pip I can say -e, what means minus edit table. It's the same. Gives this nice syntax here with my git plus https, and then say add my branch name, and then I need to provide the act name because it can't figure out the act name otherwise. So I can use my, yeah, looks good, right? I can use my branch. So I say pip install my requirements. Let's see. Yeah, it clones it. Great. Okay, let's do some development here. mxdev, I'm here on my branch. Let's add the README, and here's text, hello Namur, and then I commit this, fine. Get back to my package, want to change something else there, and say, let's look at the README. Oops, where's hello Namur? Yeah, that's pip. If I use this pip syntax, then pip really takes the hash from this commit, it's checked out, and yeah, and if it comes back, it again resets everything. So I probably can get my commit back with git reflog, but yeah, it's nasty. Okay, but there must be, yeah, probably we are in the Python, well, so I can solve this manually. So I could, for the first problem, I could download my constraints, no typo, constraints, and download all the constraints from Plone, edit it, save it, and then I can use a new version, right? Probably not what I want to do, but I can do this. Or I can pip install them as they are, use pip freeze, put this in our own constraints file, the freeze, use in the future change it in the freeze, and then I do a pip install the freeze file and I get a new version. Possible. Yeah. I can clone the repositories manually. Then it's just point to the file system, then pip doesn't care about any revisions. Possible. And yeah, I can, yeah, what do? I don't want to do this all the time typing. So I put this in a bash script. That was my story. I did this, right? So that was like, now, it's Python. There must be a tool for this, right? There's so many people using Python. I'm not the only one that uses a system with many constraints and want to develop with it. Okay, we have one called buildout, but it's not using the pip install story. And if you come to new people and explain them buildout, you're lost. So sorry, that's my experience. I really love buildout, but yeah. No, there's not such a tool. I looked really around together with Gogo, and we were not able, we analyzed everything that has pip something in its name, searched for it. Maybe we need Nuclear or something to get better results, but Google was not enough. Okay, and what, as a developer, what do you do? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so, yeah, and that was the thing. No, I don't want to reinvent buildout, but actually I looked at buildout if I can reuse something from buildout. And actually, no. not on this level. So, ta-da, mxdev. So, what it do is mix development of source packages on top of stable constraints using pip, plus version overrides, plus version ignores. That's what it does. So we can go out. I told everything about mxdev, but in fact, what's the scope of this thing, right? And the scope is that it's just a kind of a preprocessor. So it does nothing else than reads its own configuration. So yeah, we have a new configuration file for sure. Then it fetches all the files using requests, if it's from some HTTP resource or the local ones, and reads the constraints, reads the requirements, builds a nice tree, and so on. Then it replaces the constraints with the version overrides in this tree, and it also now clones from Git or SVN or something like that. And here we stole a bit from the Mr. Developer code. So it's stable code, and even wrote test for it. And then the version control system directories that are now clones that are manually by mxdev cloned are injected into the as pip editables, and afterwards it writes a new combined constraints dash mxdev txt and requirements dash mxdev text in out, and now, no, it does not more. It doesn't install anything, it really just writes these two files and done. That's the idea. So it's a tool for one purpose, and then this tool is for this step, right? Getting things in the right shape, nothing else. And then you need to use it in your process, like if you do a Makefile or Ansible or whatever you use as a tool, you can just use this in there. Yeah, and that's how this mix ini look like. It's a standard ini file, and you can do version overrides in there. You can, and with the sections, you can define clones for that it should clone or update, and define branches, even define extras that should be used in there, and so on. And let's have a look at it. So this is where we are. Need my glasses. So where we are, why overrides? Was it solutions? And take the overrides. So I have here requirements txt which uses the constraints, and I have here constraints txt which goes to the takes the beta 2, and I have here a mix ini that overrides Plone REST API. Same what I tried to do before, and it failed, so I have this configuration in here. That's my main thing. And now I run mxdev, use for sure pipx to run it. Pipx, so pipx run is, I had the lightning talk about pipx that it creates an environment, a virtual environment for those who didn't attend. It creates a virtual environment, it runs it and destroys the virtual environment and installs mxdev in this virtual environment and then destroys it afterwards. So it's a one-time shot. And it does not, I don't need to install mxdev or any tool. You can use any command line tool, then Python command line tools this way. And run it. And now it's quite fast. It fetches, it writes out what it does, it reads the files. I have no sources configured here, and then writes out files. And I have my constraints mxdev, my requirements mxdev. And if I look in my constraints mxdev, it's there are all these packages from the constraint, and you can see what happens. It reads the constraints text, and it begins reading the with the dependent constraints from this Plone org, and here are all our dependencies. We can count now, and well, a lot of, and now it's lowercase because nice sorting, and more and more and more. And there's a Plone, and we want to put Plone REST API. To get those Plone. Plone REST API. Here we go. Here we have Plone REST API, and you see it's commented, and there's a comment why it's disabled. So if you look into this file, you see what happened. So it's different. You can have an override. You can have it disabled because there's a source defined, and so on. And or it's just ignore that it's not, it's only commented and it's ignored and it needs to look up. And at the end, also for many Plone packages. Yeah, at the end there's our Plone REST API with the version we defined in the mx.ini. This file now is a constraints file I can use in my project. I don't need to check it into my version control system. I can do this if I want. Because it's generated all the time, right? So.
The advantage to checking it in is then if this .buildout is down, you can still install it.
Yeah, that's the advantage. Yeah. So if this Plone org is down again, we hope we manage that it's more stable in future. This time it was twice a year. It was 2 times it was down. But anyway, so I can install. I don't install this now because it's just a constraints file, right? It takes a while. So. And the next is the solution with the sources. I have here my mx.ini and define now nothing than my mxdev package I want to develop on with my branch. And that's it. And this is really all I do now because I want to show this example. And if I run pipx again, then it clones the repository. Even if you have submodules, it would initialize those. Hopefully you don't need it that often. And then you can run pip install, it writes it down. And I now have here a sources directory. That's a default name source. You can configure it in mix anywhere to install to, but sources as written like here is the directory, and then here I have here my mxdev in, and if I now go to this, it's just a checkout. Pip does not know anything about that. It comes from, it's just a file system thing for pip, and it's in here. They can change it, and if I run it again, then yeah, it works. And do you believe me, or should I show it? But you can look at we can look at the mix at the generated files. So this requirements mxdev txt here. It's a bit verbose. It goes to the constraints because I always wire it up with constraints. I think you can somehow disable it if you don't need it. And then the -e option here is the source as mxdev, and it extends this pre-install option because we had sometimes problems with packages fed before other packages with the sources. So if you install this thing with pre, it's not fully installed. It's just kind of pre-install. And then afterwards, if you depend on it, it's there. And it's only a file system reference, and then it doesn't know anything about Git, about hashes, and so pip just ignores any, just keeps any changes, does not care about any stuff in there. Yeah, that's what mxdev is. That's all, right? So in fact, that's almost all. You can now have some other options. To make life easier, you have general settings and defaults. You can define also extras like tests. Want to install extra tests, and you can define it in here. Or you can also add ignores, as I already said, and everything else is on the PyPy project. There's a README there's everything explained in there, it's documented. So if you go here to PyPy, here's README, and you see the main sections. You can define defaults for most stuff. You can have an install mode like with the developer, where it really just check out something and does not install it. And yeah, version overrides ignores. And for each section, you document, you have different URLs, like with sh8 and so on. The rewrites if you want to use the pip installable version, syntax, but usually don't need it. And you can say that which subdirectory the package is in, if everything also Mr. Developer can do. As you see, you can here also define which requirements in and out files you want to generate, and much more. And also you can use custom variables and reuse them later here in the inside here, because it uses this config parser extended something. Sorry, the Python config parser from the standard library, and it has its extended syntax, and it uses just this extended syntax. So you couldn't use everything that the standard library init parser, extended init parser supports. And this is used actually by which one? This one. This is actually used by cookie cutter Plone starter. And so if you want to try it with Plone, then you can use it. Friend of me, Robert, uses this for Pyramid project as well, so that's also possible. And in fact, you can use it for any project where you have this kind of problem that you have the stable constraints, or the problem with the sources, that you want to have several sources you want to work with, and then don't want to manually manage this problem. So it actually is a package that's not that well maintained, that do this tackle also the problem with the sources, but in completely different ways than we need it. So I looked at it, but it doesn't look that it would help us, so we did it on this way. Yeah, so that's the main idea of this thing. And really, I'm done with the talk now. It's very quick. For the last one, it's maybe a good idea. But we have plenty of room for questions, and Fred.
So the whole premise, I think, why we are doing this is because pip does not allow to override the stuff. Did any of the Plone core developers ask the pip or the PyPA team why this is, and can we actually allow it in pip? Is there some big rule there that we could say, okay, look, with one, like we do -e to have a source thing, that we say, okay, if it's -o, then we're allowed to override it, because that would solve half of the problem, I think. Probably, did we ever ask the pip team can we improve pip for this use case when you have more than one package?
Yeah, I think that would be the answer, and I'm not sure. No idea. So
Because we take it as a given now.
I've seen discussion of that in the pip repository before, and I think it's something that there are other people that want it, but it's hard, it's complicated to solve. But yeah, maybe some progress can be made there.
I think a pip, getting something to pip is complicated, additionally if it's a new feature or a new functionality. And actually I had not the energy to go this path. It was like also get things done, and that was pre-processing is actually the way that, the easiest way to do this.
I have a question of separation of concerns in the virtual environments, because if you, in the long run, don't want to have the mxdev in the product installation itself, so what's about the cookie cutter template? Does it create a separate virtual environment for just creating or for just running?
Actually it does
mxdev?
not. Actually it does not, but I would really like to use pipx for this, because that solves the problem. With pipx, it just fires, pipx run just fires up a virtual environment, installs mxdev, run mxdev, and destroys the virtual environment. And that's, yeah, that's the same as cookie cutter. If you want to run cookie cutter, you can say do this with pipx, right? And so all this tooling does not need to be installed or pollutes somehow our environment. And mxdev should not. But it's actually the current Plone starter does install it into the virtual environment, yeah.
So a comment and a question. A comment about what Fred just asked about. I met one of the pip maintainers just in a shop a few weeks ago, and he said there are very few people working on pip actually. So that might be one of the reasons it's hard to get stuff in. So that's the comment. And the question is, working with mxdev, are there other features that you had in buildout and that you were missing in pip, which is why you did mxdev? Are there other features that you are missing and that you plan to build?
Yeah, one feature I would like to have a lightning talk about this later is the problem to generate all the ZOP configuration. That we tackled this. We had in the same project. If you want in buildout, you have this ZOP recipe ZOP2 instance, which has a load of configuration and has several options. And actually, I also was a need to generate the ZOP configuration, and that was missed. That was the main missing parts, I think. That was these two parts. Yeah. And the one is a cookie cutter ZOP instance that is now I created in the project to get this running, and the other one is this mxdev. Yeah. And with this both pieces, I think, okay, with buildout you can do really good things like creating your varnish configuration, creating this, have templating and create a template and copy stuff over. So that's what buildout is strong at. And it's much more than what pip or mxdev or whatever do. So yeah, it's difficult to really get it replaced in projects where you all do all this stuff in one buildout file, but I think in larger projects and now with all this containerization, you have all these pieces separated, and then you don't have this big build-out anymore. But that's the main difference, I think.
I have more than a comment and a question. I think it's all about having small tools that do one thing exactly good, and then have several tools working together.
Yeah, it's
so you can switch out one of the tools if you have a better solution at the point. This is Unix approach. If pip supports this, then we can drop mxdev and use the feature, but now it solves the problem. So that's I think that's it. Other questions, ideas, remarks?
Just a quick comment that we do have this in the Plone 6 documentation underneath the install, and I pasted a link into the Discord channel for this track.
Thank you.
Yeah. Also, the Plone Kickstarter thing is there's a training documentation about deployment, and if you want to try this with the Plone Kickstarter things, then I really recommend to get into this for Plone 6. There's also mxdev integrated already.
Another question. So you mentioned that one of the motivation was that people had trouble to learn build-out when they had done pip before. Have you had the experience already to show mxdev to someone that never did mxdev and only pip? And
actually not, because it's so simple. It's just you have an input file, you have a configuration, you have an output file, and you can look at it and everything's in place. It was like, oh great, I now can look into this file and actually see this is the original package is commented, and also with why it is commented, right? And down you have then the section where of all stuff that was changed. So that makes it easy to inspect, right? It was the comment by Gogo was also maybe it's a missing part in build-out, that you better see what's going on, what's really happening there, right? And that makes debugging of build-out difficult. And if you have a problem with build-out, a lot of people have no idea what's going on, right? And
Gogo is not really a newbie, right? Gogo is not really a newbie.
Not really, but he's always. There was this day I was in Vienna, and I told it today other people. It was several years ago, and then he had a build-out problem, and then I looked at his build-out, and he said I took 2 days and I can't find this. And he's really not new in this, right? And then I looked at it in like 1 minute, and then I said, okay, this part, that must be the problem, changed it, and everything was okay. And said, put your hands on my laptop, and in the next 3 months my build-out will run, right? And that's the level. And if you want to explain build-out to new people, it's not about only, now we are here in a workflow that is teach at schools, people learn pip with learning Python, right? So that's one of these tools.
I think you misunderstand my question.
Yeah.
My question is not about the fact that build-out is hard, because I agree with you about that. My question is, have you had proof of total people that don't know anything and that have to use mxdev, and is it actually simpler?
Yeah,
That's my question.
it is, yeah, I had
Okay.
some people, yeah. Okay. It's actually that simple.
I have another question. As I'm not done some core development in the Plone world, more on the underlying Zope world the last years, is mxdev in some way replacing the setup of the build-out core dev for development in the short or long term?
Yeah,
And maybe a question more to the release managers.
yeah, it's more in this direction, I think.
Moritz, can you say something about that?
I don't have plans yet, but it makes sense, yeah, for selling pip as the main installation story for if you do it manually instead of build out, then it makes sense to switch the core development build out also over to pip. Then you at least need some other tools to say, okay, we now have a constraints file and we need to automatically turn that into a versions file so people using build out can still have use the right versions. And look at what other stuff we have in the core dev build-outs that we still need, and which is not yet solved by mxdev or by
Yeah,
some
and also
scripts.
Mr.
But that
Roboto
should be-
and all the integration is all built around build-out, right? So it's quite some effort, I think, to get this changed. Not because you can have the main. I think it's easy to just have pip install there and have our sources in. It's easy, but also integration with Jenkins, with now with some GitHub actions we already have, with whatever is and then with Mr. Roboto, and you have several pieces that are working together. Maybe it's that would also mean that we may want to go to, as already in other talks, to GitHub actions, right? With a build-out with a core of thing instead of testing it in Jenkins. There was this idea, and then we can say, okay, then we need anyway to touch everything. Then we can do it in one step, right?
Someone could toy around with creating pip.coredev instead of build.coredev and try that only for Plone 6 and see what happens there. Just on the side for a while and see if that somehow works, and including GitHub actions. And if someone wants a nice project, that could be cool.
Hey, I love this. I came in a little late, and maybe this is a little off topic. How does pip, I've never done a pip install Plone, how does pip know the version file? Just that simple
in pip you have the constraints file, and the constraints file contains the versions you want to use, and we provide on this Plone org a constraints file for all the versions. So.
Is there now for a manual process when the constraints file that's hosted on HTTP, that's the versions.cfg, is there a translation for that for pip or?
From the versions CFG. I think, Maurits, you have some script, right?
Yeah, at least the core development build out. We find the version CFG there with all the extents, and when I'm releasing, there's a release directory with a tox.ini. And yeah, that can read those versions, all the versions files, including what we extend from SOAP, and creates constraints.txt from that.
That answered it, thank you.
Actually, there's something else. We have a nightly build of Docker. So I copy your script to the Plone Backend repository, and it also does the same thing. Goes there, get your file, generates constraints, and then you can basically pip install. Cool. Thank you, Maurits, as always.
Thank you, Maurits.
That does not contain a checkout of CMF Plone and stuff, I guess. Erico?
Oh, got a question.
I think the nightly does not contain a checkout or something of CMF Plone or other things that are checked out.
I'm not so sure. That's a good question. Let's take a look.
I think we need to populate the needs in the checkout.
I think so. Yeah.
I'm glad we've had this talk.
And answering side question here, we do have a nightly of Volto as well. Perfect. So you can be brave.
The question I have is there some integration of mxdev with Tox so that you can, in Tox, for example, do your add-on development and reference several different Plone versions so that you can... I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I'm using, either Plone scale or Plone named file has some git tox ini and GitHub actions that do use mxdev. So that Plone named file also gets the checkout of Plone scale and the other way around. I'm not sure which one of the two uses it, or both maybe. And it can be a bit simplified, I think, but I think it's mostly Plone named file that's trying to get Plone scale in it as well. Like those URLs. Okay. Where did you get this from? Who is your source?
Well, it's off. Anyway. Switches off automatically. Didn't touch it. Okay. Thank you very much for being here.
Shakespeare seems to be nice at poetry.
Exactly.
I solve a single problem. then Plone, poetry install Plone or whatever it is, takes ages.
It's what the cool kids are doing.
We are the cool parents.